My name is Jason, and this is Technique of the Week. Thanks so much for joining us this week. Today, Technique of the Week, we're going to be showing you some the approved and proper methods to putting on color hardener. It's a little bit of a more advanced technique, so it takes a little bit more skill. We see a lot of guys fail with color hardener just because of a couple little things that make it a lot easier. So that's what we're going to be going over today. One thing about color hardener is you will not get a better job. There's not a better finished product out there. I think, you talk to anybody, any of the professionals in this industry, I think they would tell you the same thing. So if you want to up your game, if you want to advance your technique, for doing stamped concrete and make them look better, this is the way to do it. The first thing with the color hardener is what we see too is not fluffing the color hardener up. It wants to settle during storage. So you're going to want to shake it up, tip it upside down, move it around, and then you're going to want to put your hand in the bucket and fluff it. So I'm going to fluff this. If I just went straight to into the bucket and didn't do this, there'd be chunks of color hardener that, when I throw them, it's going to want to hit and make like a little crater. So that's what we want to, that's why I want to fluff it. The material should be able to run through your fingers. Number two with the color hardener is the coverage, okay? You're supposed to apply 70% of this on the first coverage. You're gonna get about 100 square feet per 5-gallon bucket, and you're gonna wanna get 70% of that on the very first initial application. So a lot of people do not put it on heavy enough the first time. A good way to do it, I know the size of this patio is roughly around like 650 to 700 square feet, so I know I'm gonna use roughly 6.5 to 7 buckets, okay? And that's gonna be my gauge. So if you get done with the project and you're bringing 3 buckets back, that means you didn't put it on near heavy enough. So I'm putting on 5 buckets the first time before I even get to my touch-ups. We always wanna start at the farthest point and work our way back, because if we start here, then we're actually throwing more color here, and when I throw it out there, it's getting on here anyway. So I always want to start at the furthest spot and work backward. So you can tell with this powder, you can tell when I throw it on there, it's the color that it is in the bucket, okay? We need the concrete to wet the color out before we float it. We see a lot of guys get to this step right here, where it's still dry like this. That will not float in, okay? That is not ready to float yet. Okay, when we come back, I'll cover the rest of this, and then I'll come back and you'll see that this is gonna be, it'll turn a darker shade, and the moisture from the concrete is gonna wet that out. You can see where we first started here, where I was throwing that. It's completely changed color. It's a lot darker now. That means the moisture in the concrete's actually wetted out, and now at this point I can float it. So I'm just gonna take this. If I did this floating, when I first put it on there, it would not float in. It would be nasty. You'd be calling me saying, oh, this stuff doesn't work. It's, it just doesn't float in right for me, just because they're not using the color hardener right. On a hot or windy day, we can spray, some type of finishing aid on this. Color hardener is very Portland cement rich. It's actually adding a lot more Portland cement to the top, which is a great thing, especially here in Ohio, where we have the bad freeze thaw. This is a spot where it wasn't quite wetted out yet, okay? And that's what'll happen. It will not close up because this is still too dry. So that's the reason, that's what we're trying to avoid right there. So as you can see right here, there's still a little bit of the gray concrete, showing through. But that's one pass, and it's almost, completely covered. That's where I want to be on my first coverage, on my first pass with the color. I want to be at the point where I'm just having a couple spots here and there. If anything, I would err on the side of, putting too much on than not enough, because it really does help if you throw the lot on the very first, time. Well, that's it for this week's Technique of the Week. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.